Judge Grayson believed he was about to sentence an ignorant teenager until the accused began tearing apart the prosecution's case like a practice attorney. The air inside the Los Angeles County Courthouse felt heavy, almost suffocating. Spectators packed the gallery, whispering among themselves as the drama unfolded. The defense table seemed oversized for the young man standing beside it, his hands tucked in his pockets, chin lifted just high enough to show he wasn't afraid. Jalen Dawson, 19, stood accused of grand theft auto and resisting arrest. The charges carried weight, yet the way Judge Walter Grayson looked at him made it clear this trial was about something far deeper than the law. Grayson reclined in his chair, tapping his fingers lazily against the gleaming surface of the bench. He peered down at Jalen over his glasses, his mouth curling somewhere between a grin and a sneer. "So, you think you're some kind of legal prodigy?" His tone dripped with sarcasm. "This isn't debate club, kid." Laughter rolled through the courtroom. The bailiff, the stenographer, even the prosecutor shared in the mockery. But Jalen didn't so much as flinch. He wasn't there to laugh. He had spent years training for a moment like this, though not as a defendant. He knew the courtroom the way most kids knew basketball stats. While his friends spent afternoons gaming, he spent his memorizing case law and arguing pretend trials in his mind. His mother, Denise Dawson, had worked 2 decades as a paralegal, and Jalen had grown up hearing everything she saw: prosecutors who bent the rules, judges who played favorites, defense lawyers who barely put up a fight. He absorbed every word. By 14, he could dissect a trial better than most first-year law students. But none of that mattered to Judge Grayson. To him, Jalen was just another reckless kid wasting the court's time. "Let's move this along," the judge muttered, flipping open the file. "I've got a golf game at 2. The gallery chuckled again, but something shifted. Jalen's lips twitched into a faint, almost invisible smile. Grayson had just made his first mistake. The courtroom hadn't caught on yet. Prosecutor Mitchell Carrington rose, radiating the confidence of a man convinced of victory. His tailored suit was flawless, his tie immaculate, and his voice carried the smooth assurance of someone who had repeated the same argument 100 times before. "Your Honor, the state intends to prove, beyond any reasonable doubt, that the defendant, Jalen Dawson, was apprehended in possession of a stolen vehicle, a 2022 Audi A6, reported missing only hours earlier. Officers pursued him through downtown Los Angeles, where he attempted to evade capture before being detained. His fingerprints were discovered on the steering wheel. The evidence, Your Honor, speaks for itself." The words hit hard. Murmurs rippled through the audience. On paper, the case looked airtight. A stolen car, a chase, a suspect who ran. Judge Grayson looked at Jalen once more over the top of his glasses, then nodded toward Carrington. "Proceed." Carrington strode toward the jury box, his polished shoes echoing sharply on the floor. "The defense will likely argue that this was all a misunderstanding, that Mr. Dawson is merely an unlucky bystander caught in the wrong place at the wrong time." He toned, locking eyes with Jalen. "But let's be real, what innocent man runs from police?" The tension thickened again. Grayson leaned forward, resting his chin against his hand. Jalen didn't even blink. Carrington continued, shuffling through his paperwork. "Your Honor, I have here the sworn statement of Officer Daniel Ruiz, who personally observed the defendant behind the wheel before he attempted to flee. The vehicle was confirmed stolen, and the arrest was made in full accordance with procedure." Grayson let out a slow exhale and nodded. "Seems pretty clear to me." For most in the room, it did. It certainly looked that way. The case seemed straightforward. A stolen car, a chase, an arrest. But Jalen had spent too many years studying courtroom battles to miss the weak spots. Still, he kept quiet, observing, waiting. Judge Grayson tapped his gavel lightly. "All right," he said, "let's hear the defense." He turned toward Jalen's appointed attorney, Lisa Thornton, a public defender who had barely spoken since walking into the courtroom. She rose hesitantly, shuffling her notes. "Your Honor, my client." Jalen placed a steady hand on her arm. It was a silent signal. Lisa hesitated, then sat back down, and for the first time, Jalen spoke. "I'll be representing myself, Your Honor." The room froze. Grayson blinked at him, half in disbelief, half in amusement. "You what?" Jalen's tone didn't waver. I'll be handling my own defense. A murmur rolled through the spectators. The bailiff's eyebrows lifted. Carrington's confident smirk slipped, only for a heartbeat, before he chuckled under his breath. Well, he said dryly, this should be entertaining. But nobody was laughing once Jalen took a step forward, because from that moment, everything changed. The air inside the courtroom grew heavier as he squared his shoulders. Hands still in his pockets, Jalen let the silence linger, just long enough for everyone to feel it, before speaking again. Your Honor, he began evenly. Before I proceed, I'd like to clarify something with the prosecution. Carrington crossed his arms, one brow raised. Go ahead. Jalen took a slow, measured step closer. You said Officer Daniel Ruiz personally saw me behind the wheel before my arrest, correct? Carrington exhaled sharply, sounding impatient. That's right, and it's clearly stated in his report. Of course it is, Jalen replied with a small nod. Then he turned toward Judge Grayson. Your Honor, I move to strike that testimony from evidence. Grayson narrowed his eyes. On what basis? Jalen pulled his hands from his pockets, gesturing toward the prosecution's table. Because Officer Ruiz never actually saw me in that car. In fact, he wasn't even on duty when the chase began. Carrington's expression faltered, confusion flickering for the first time. What are you implying? Simple, Jalen said, taking another step forward. If the court permits, I'd like to request access to Officer Ruiz's GPS logs from that night. If his report claims he saw me driving, his location data should confirm it. He paused, letting the silence stretch. But, he added quietly, I have a strong feeling it won't. The whispers in the gallery grew louder. Grayson frowned, turning toward the prosecutor. Counselor. Carrington cleared his throat, his jaw tightening. Your Honor, that report was filed by a sworn officer of the law. Are we really entertaining the word of a defendant over that of a trained professional? Jalen gave a faint shrug, almost casual. If the officer was exactly where he said he was, the GPS records will prove it. But if he wasn't, he let the unfinished thought hang in the air. Grayson studied him carefully, then shifted his gaze to Carrington. Does the prosecution have any objection to verifying those GPS logs? Carrington hesitated, only a second, but it was enough. The jurors noticed, the gallery noticed, and most importantly, so did the judge. Jalen drew in a quiet, steady breath. He'd seen that pause before, hundreds of times while watching trials, analyzing prosecutors, learning how they dance around the truth. And he knew one thing for certain. When a prosecutor stalled, it meant doubt. Grayson sighed, rubbing at his temple. Carrington finally shook his head. No objections, Your Honor. But the damage was done. For the first time, the courtroom wasn't laughing. The silence now had weight, sharp and echoing. Carrington shuffled through his papers, the confidence in his voice thinning around the edges. Your Honor, he said quickly, while we await those GPS results, the fact remains that the defendant's fingerprint were found on the steering wheel of the stolen vehicle. Jalen nodded slightly, his face unreadable. That's true, he said, stepping forward once more. But let's take a closer look at that evidence, shall we? Grayson raised an eyebrow, intrigued. With a small gesture for him to proceed, Judge Grayson nodded. Jalen turned toward the jury, locking eyes with each juror one by one. The prosecution wants you to believe, he began steadily, that my fingerprint being inside a car automatically means I stole it. That's the story they are trying to sell. But let's think about that logically. He drew a slow breath, his voice calm, deliberate, razor-sharp in its control. Imagine you walk into a department store, he continued, and try on a jacket. You slide your hands into the pockets, maybe zip it up, then put it back and leave. A few hours later, someone steals that same jacket. Would the fact that your fingerprints are on it mean you committed the theft? A few jurors traded uneasy looks. Someone in the gallery murmured under their breath. Jalen didn't let the pause linger. The car they are talking about was parked outside a 7-Eleven hours before it was reported stolen. I was inside that store with 3 friends. And yes, when we came out, I leaned against that car. I even opened the door because it was unlocked. I didn't think much of it. I didn't take it. I didn't drive it. I didn't steal a thing from inside. It was a dumb, careless moment. Nothing more. He let his words hang for a heartbeat, then added, voice sharp as glass. So tell me, does touching something make you a criminal? Carrington cleared his throat, riffling through his papers, clearly hunting for something to regain control. But Jalen wasn't finished. And while we're on the subject, he said, turning toward the bench, let's talk about how that fingerprint analysis was actually done. He looked directly at Judge Grayson. Your Honor was a forensic technician who handled this evidence subpoenaed to testify. The judge blinked, momentarily thrown off. His gaze shifted to Carrington. The prosecutor hesitated, then muttered, No. Jalen's lips pressed together. So just to be clear, the state is using forensic results to try and convict me, yet they didn't think it was necessary to bring in the expert who processed them. No opportunity for me to cross-examine, question the chain of custody, or verify the accuracy of the analysis. Carrington's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Jalen gave a small nod, like that was confirmation enough. Interesting. Judge Grayson exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. It was the look of a man realizing this trial wasn't going to be the easy win he'd expected. But Jalen wasn't done, not yet, because what he said next would change everything. He stepped forward slowly, his voice steady but firm. Your Honor, I'd like to submit into evidence an official statement from the owner of the vehicle. Grayson's brows furrowed. The owner? Jalen nodded. Yes, sir. Mr. Raymond Whitaker, the registered owner of the stolen Audi. He gave a statement to police that, for some reason, never made it into the prosecution's filings. And I think we all know why. He turned toward Carrington. Do you recall what Mr. Whitaker told officers the night his car was stolen? Carrington's jaw locked tight. He knew exactly where this was heading. Jalen didn't wait. He pulled a printed transcript from his file, lifted it, and read aloud. I left my car running when I ran inside the gas station. Some kid must have jumped in and taken off. But it wasn't the guy they arrested. I saw the kid, and he was white. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Jalen held up the page. That's from the original police report, the same one the prosecution conveniently failed to mention. He turned back to Judge Grayson. The arresting officer left that out of his testimony. The prosecution ignored it. And now they want this jury to believe that I, someone who doesn't even match the suspect description, am guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Carrington scrambled forward, voice sharp and defensive. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The defendant was found in possession of the vehicle. But Jalen cut him off with a shake of his head. No, I wasn't. He didn't raise his voice, but every word landed like a hammer. I was arrested several blocks away, he said clearly, from where that vehicle was abandoned. I was walking home after grabbing snacks with my friends. Jalen said evenly, I wasn't in that car. I wasn't near it. I wasn't running from anything. The only thing connecting me to this case is sloppy police work and assumptions. Judge Grayson released a slow, weary breath, pressing his fingers against his temple. The case was falling apart, fast, and everyone could see it. Jalen turned back to face the jury. The real suspect got away that night. The officers saw a black kid in the same neighborhood and decided that was close enough. That's what this case is really about. Silence. Grayson cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. Does the prosecution have anything further? Carrington stood rigid, his face flushed red. No, Your Honor. Grayson sighed, eyes lingering on Jalen for a long moment before turning to the jury. Then he leaned forward and spoke the words that would echo in that courtroom for years. Case dismissed. For a single, stunned heartbeat, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Half the room gasped, half whispered in disbelief. Reporters scrambled, pens flying across notepads. Jalen didn't move. He just stood there, letting the noise fade behind him, letting the truth of it settle like dust. Judge Grayson, still gripping his gavel, looked at Jalen with something new in his eyes, something softer. Recognition, maybe even regret. Jalen met his gaze briefly, then turned to leave. But before he reached the door, the judge spoke again. Mr. Dawson. Jalen stopped, not turning around. Grayson hesitated, then said quietly, "You should think about law school." A small smile tugged at Jalen's mouth. He didn't need to think about it. He already knew. Outside the courthouse, the air buzzed with noise and flashing lights. Reporters filled the steps, shouting over one another, microphones and cameras pushed forward like weapons. "Jalen, did you know the judge would throw out the case? What's next for you? How does it feel to outsmart a veteran prosecutor?" Jalen pulled his hoodie up and kept walking. He wasn't interested in the headlines or the spectacle. This wasn't about showing off, it was about something bigger. At the bottom of the stairs, his mother, Denise, stood waiting, arms crossed, face unreadable. For a long moment, she just looked at him. Then she shook her head, exhaling a shaky breath. "Boy, you nearly scared me to death." Jalen laughed softly, scratching the back of his neck. Had to take a chance. "Ma." She stared at him another moment, then pulled him into a fierce hug. "You always were the stubborn one." Cameras kept flashing, but Jalen didn't notice anymore. Across the street, leaning by his car, Judge Grayson watched quietly. His posture had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something else, reflection. He hadn't expected this case to be anything special. Just another file, another defendant, another guilty plea. But this one was different. This one would stay with him. Because Jalen had done something most people never managed to do. He'd forced the system to look at itself. And for once, it blinked first. There's a lesson buried in that moment. How many cases end the same way? How many people have been convicted, not because of evidence, but because of bias, shortcuts, and a system more obsessed with closing cases and finding truth? Jalen had the knowledge to fight back. But what about those who don't? This wasn't just one trial. It was a mirror held up to every courtroom. He knew where he was headed next. This wouldn't be the last time he stood in front of a judge. But next time, he wouldn't be the defendant. He'd be the lawyer. And when that day came, he wouldn't be standing alone. If this story made you pause, even for a second, then share it. Because the justice system runs on laws, but it's powered by people. And people can change, but only if we make them. So hit that like button, subscribe for more stories that matter, and keep the conversation alive. Because next time, it might not be Jalen. It might be someone you know.